I am so excited. I'm so happy, and I'm so honored to have one of the most versatile saxophonists in history, Ed Calle, on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Donna, thank you very much for the invite. It's really wonderful to meet you, and it's really wonderful to be here.
And a huge thanks to Melvin Quinones from Victory Musical Instruments, because he's the one that set this up. He has great instruments. He's actually sponsoring this particular podcast. So huge thanks to Melvin. Huge shout out to him.
Yeah, Melvin is a great friend. I'm a big fan of his, big fan of the instruments. I'll even play a little soprano for you today. But I love what he's doing, and I think that his efforts are helping so many of the young musicians, and in particular, because of the price points and everything else, so many of the musicians around the world, Latin America and places like that. He's really democratizing the music for them. And so I'm a huge fan of his as a human being, as a person. We're friends. We've known each other a long time. Wow. And I really want to help him as much as I can. And I'm thankful for you mentioning it and for what he's doing for the saxophone.
Yeah. And you know what? Since we're there, why not? I like to have my podcast be like a chat, like a conversation, but you've got your saxophone ready. I don't want that reed going dry. So which soprano sax is this? Which model?
No, I have to tell you, because I just got it from him, and it's, oh my goodness, here it is. This is a Growling Sax, and it's a Uprise soprano, and I've never played a curved soprano before. I've played one goofing around one time, but I've never really played one, and we hung out for a few hours, and I got to play, and it really sounded good. So it's just a great instrument, and I'm really impressed by the construction of them, the price, the sound of them. So and I'm playing Jody's DV. This reed's a little harder than I'm using when I use it on the other horn. It's a little different because of the curvature, but it plays in tune. It plays great. It has a really nice center of the sound, and it's interesting that you can actually hear yourself playing the soprano when you're playing a curved, because normally the bell is so far away. So this is a different kind of feel. But I'm really impressed by what he's doing. And I'm a huge fan of his, and I really want to help him as much as I can. The same way that you want to help everybody, the same way that I love Jody, and we'll talk about that. And just, you want to help all the people who are really making it easier for us to make music, and making it possible for the younger people and the new generations to make music. It's a blessing for us all. And so I'm a huge fan of all the people out there working in the products industry, and in particular Melvin, because he's just a class act.
He definitely is, and I've met him a few times already, and for sure he definitely is. And I've seen his instruments; they're beautiful. And so when you just played that right now, I heard the center of the tone. I was listening. Yes. I was like, wow, even on this Zoom thing, right? I mean, you could still, it still comes across, and it just sounds really, really good. And it sounds like, so give us your, in your mindset, your impressions, like you're blowing through this horn. What does it feel like? Is there, resistance wise, is it easy to blow through? You mentioned the intonation. That's a big, huge pain point for soprano sax.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, they're definitely not tuned at the factory most of the time. And it's all of our, all of us have a lot of gray hair because of it. Every saxophone player, I don't care who you are, we all talk about pitch and all that kind of stuff. But no, the horn plays really free. It doesn't have a lot of resistance. I have a very hard reed on here because I tend to play very hard reeds, but it depends on, every horn's a little different. But it plays very free. It plays in tune. It has a really nice center right from the minute that you pick it up. It's really effortless. And if I have a reed that's a little bit softer, it'll make it somewhat easier. But it just, they're instruments that really play well. And I had a chance to play, I went to the factory and must have hung out for a whole day and just played a lot of different things, and they're all great instruments, and they play really free. I mean, that's very important for us today, because there's such a challenge playing with live, and even in recording, but playing live with volume and with setups and with all the things that go on with the music. So I'm a huge fan of what he's doing, and it's really a wonderful instrument. I'm looking forward to playing it live, and I'm a big guy, so it looks a little funny. It feels funny for me. I think the audience will just see that it's a little saxophone.
No, absolutely.
You always get that question.
I have the exact opposite problem. Like a tenor on me, everybody says I look like Lisa Simpson.
I have one of those little Lisa Simpson dolls here in the studio. I'm a huge fan of that show, but yeah, when they built these things, I don't think they had in mind that we were all different sizes.
That's for sure. But yeah, so you're using the JodyJazz, the DV setup on that, and
it's an 8-star
8-star
DV, and I play the Jodys on everything. In fact, on the alto, I've been playing the SuperJet. And it's funny because I come from an older school, so I'm not I might play bright anyway. My setup is bright anyway because of the way I play and the way I hear the saxophone. But so I play that mouthpiece on the alto, and funny enough, it's not. Everybody thinks, oh, that mouthpiece is really bright. It's not. It sounds really good, and it has a great center. I went to Argentina, did a bunch of stuff on alto, and did some stuff in Latin America, and everybody's like, wow, I love that sound. It's like, yeah, it's Jody's SuperJet. So on there, I'm using the SuperJet. On the tenor, most of the time I'm playing the DV New York.
Oh,
because and that's on the Mount Blue record. There's a lot of that. On the baritone, I play the DV, and that's on the Mount Blue record, and you hear that sound, and I love that. The edge and and kind of the center and the guts of that sound. There's one of the great things about Jody is that he's a great saxophone player.
Yes.
If you ever hear Jody play, he has one of the most beautiful alto sounds in the world. And so, and we're friends, and I've known him a long time, and he really, we'll talk about this in a second, but he really was a lifesaver for me. Literally saved my career in terms of the mouthpieces. And so he knows what he's doing. And then he's got a factory that everything he makes is completely consistent. Whether he sends me a Chicago or whether he sends me anything, I have a dark, I have a hard rubber. I use the HR sometimes on the soprano if I want something in a symphony or something that's a little darker, that kind of thing. So the oboe players don't yell at me. They never yell, but you always want to. We're always in service of the other musicians whenever we play. It's never about us. It's about the ensemble. It's about the music. And so having those tools at your disposal with Jody makes it a blessing. And he really is a master musician. He's a master saxophonist. I love his sound. I always tell him that. I'm a huge fan. And his mouthpieces are great. And they really, I had an injury, and he called me, and I went up to see him in Savannah, and we spent time together, and I found that his mouthpieces allowed me to play again because I couldn't play because I had ruptured my diaphragm playing with in really loud settings all the time. I grew up, I played with Gloria Estefan, and that sound on stage is unbelievable. I played with Extreme with Nuno Betancourt. Yeah. That sound is very loud. All the Latin music in Miami, we're very aggressive. Our music, we're a lot like New York in that the music is very aggressive. The Latin music, because there are timbales and there's congas and there's cowbells and brass, there's a lot of volume on the stage. And with Arturo Sandoval, there's a tremendous amount of stage volume, the amount of energy that the band plays with and Arturo plays with. And as a trumpet player, he needs to have his monitor. He needs to hear himself. Otherwise, the trumpet players won't last. Even Superman, like Arturo, won't last. So yeah. I've always played with very little monitor or no monitor in his band, even though the stage volume is brutal. And at the Blue Note, we were playing, and all of a sudden in the middle of a song, I felt this pop. And I thought I had a heart attack. and I was
Oh my
still
God.
standing, so it wasn't a heart attack. But all of a sudden, I couldn't breathe,
Oh
and
wow.
I finished the set, but I was hyperventilating. I was yawning about 5 times a minute or more. And so I still do it sometimes, you'll notice. But I went to some specialists. They finally found out what it was. They at first they put me on a stress test, the medical stuff, and all that. And what ended up happening is that I have it's called a bacillec hernia. There's a term for it. It happens to musicians. Primarily happens to orchestral trombone players because they have to play loud and play really long phrases and things like that. So they showed me the CAT scan, and unfortunately, when you have that rupture, you can't sew it because the diaphragm is like flank steak, and so they'd have to put a mesh in there, and the mesh will reduce or destroy your pliability.
Oh
And
wow.
so the doctor said to me, "Look, the best that we're going to be able to do is hope that it gets better over time. It will never be right, but you'll be able to come back." And with Jody's help, it took me about 2 years where I almost didn't play out very much. I didn't do a lot of things. And it really helped me to get my playing back because I needed something that didn't have the kind of resistance. And his mouthpieces have long tables, so they really helped. And I was with Michael Brecker in Japan. We were there for a week together. I was with Bobby Caldwell, and he was with the band, and we were friends, and we hung out. And he laughed. He said to me, he said, "Oh, great." He said, I blew out my throat. He said, "You blew out your diaphragm." I said, "Yeah, I don't know how you do it." And we talked about the problems with the volume. And so for saxophone players, and this is for the podcast, I really want to emphasize the importance of not trying to overblow the rest of the band, because there's going to come a point, at 20 you're indestructible, at 30 you're indestructible, at 40 you start to see some dents. But once you turn about 50 years old, your body has been through a lot with the saxophone. If you've been doing things wrong, like your wrist, you're going to get carpal tunnel. If you're doing things wrong with your teeth or your jaw, but with overblowing, we get into all kinds of problems aside from the musical stuff, which you never finish a phrase, the pitch goes out the window, the tone becomes really harsh and hard to listen to. You lose a lot of control, but just the health thing. And for me, this thing with the air, I still have days, and you'll see me yawning right now. What happens is when you yawn is that your body's not getting oxygen. And so when I started yawning all the time, I couldn't figure it out. And the doctor finally said to me, he said, "Look, what's happening is the air is going in, but it's not getting back up to your lungs. It's just, you're losing it." And so
Wow.
Jody spent time with me, and with his help, I was able to get through a period where I was able to play again. Though I wasn't playing as much, I couldn't practice 8 hours a day. I couldn't do the kinds of things that I had always done. But he really helped me. But for young musicians, oh my goodness, please make sure you can hear yourself. You're never going to win that war with a monitor. So if you can, get a set of in-ears, maybe take one off so you can hear pitch and things like that. And just if you have a band and those kinds of things, make sure that your rhythm section understands that it's a little saxophone playing against electronics that are designed to, fill stadiums. We can't do that. And so I hope that other people don't have the experience that I've had, because it has been really debilitating musically and other things for me.
I'm sure emotionally as well. And, yeah. I guess, okay, let me get into a couple of things here. When it comes to the overblowing, the first thought that came actually into mind, because I also play trumpet too, is
Yes.
that my trumpet teachers would always say that you have to rely on your hearing up here in your mind. I'm pointing to that. If you're listening to the podcast, watch the video, please. But rely on your hearing up here more than listening to the bell. And so I'm just thinking to myself, like, there was a time I was doing, I was playing at the Viper Room, and the week before I checked out the place, and the sound person was great, and I'm like, oh, this is great. This is gonna be perfect. The week I go, they had a sub. It was awful. I was
Oh
so
gosh.
drowned out, I couldn't hear anything. And the tune I was doing, I needed to hear the keyboard. I couldn't hear the keyboard. So I was just relying on instinct. And I said to myself, I am not, if I overblow, that's it. The tone goes out the door. It feels bad. You get embouchure problems, all that kind of thing. But I was relying on hearing in my head. I was relying on, that more than anything else. And there's only so much you can do. The sad thing is that sometimes sound people don't listen to you. They won't put your sound up. And what they do is they put everybody up instead of, being careful and monitoring everybody and being tasteful, with the sound. So my first thought would be to say to people, and I don't know whether you agree or not, but just rely on what you're hearing in your head. And, yeah, we kind of need to hear the bell, but in a sense, if we can get in the habit of hearing what we hear, what we want to hear, like in our head and stuff like that, when we're practicing at home, making sure that that's working, I think that's almost one of the best things that you can do in a really bad situation.
And it's funny you said that. I normally play without a monitor. There's a band that I recorded a lot with and played a lot. There's a lot of videos on YouTube. Palo, Palo. Yeah. It's a great band. Very loud. I have timbales right next to me. I have, all the other stuff. It's an incredible band of Afro-Cuban funk. I never use a monitor in that band. Never. Because I find that exactly what you said, when we're zoned in, it doesn't happen every day, but you can always hear the sound inside your head. But when you're really concentrating and you're zoned in and you're playing all the time, you actually hear what you're going to play before you play it. You can hear it, you can see it. You can, what's going to come out because there's that momentary thing where the idea is being created and it's coming next. And so that will save you. And in Palo, it was just a huge blessing because it really allowed me to work on the saxophone and on the music without having to worry about whether I could hear myself or not. I knew what I was going to play before I could play it, no matter how complicated the line was or what I was, going for. When I was having a normal day, I could really hear that stuff. And some days we're kind of deaf. Some days no matter how hard you try, you can't hear anything that you're doing, or you're just not there. It's just one of those days where you're off. And that makes it a little harder. But I found that having no monitor is better than having a monitor that either sounds bad or that's too loud. And then there comes a point where at some point in the discussion with the musicians that we work with, we have to say to them, look, this is a social setting. This is not about you shouting louder than the other guy. Yeah. This is about making music. And unfortunately, a lot of musicians, I find bass players in particular, are really bad about it because the bass sound doesn't really propagate for a while. Those wavelengths are very long. And so they're standing in front of their amp, and the real damage is being done to you out front in the middle of the stage. And they don't get it. And I've had cases where I've fired bass players because of it. I had one guy that I took the speaker and I put it up by his ear. I said, here, let me know how you enjoy it. And whoa, I said, you're fired. And that's the end of it. And I hate to be an ass, but there comes a point where I don't, now I'm dealing with this for the rest of my life. I'm going to be dealing with a medical problem because of people who are just rude or just ignorant. They don't understand what they're doing. Guitar players, that 2.5K, 3.5K, that range, it's brutal. And it pierces through your soul. It doesn't just pierce through your ears. And they crank it up and they think it sounds great. And you're like getting bombarded in the front, and trying to play over that is impossible. And there are a lot of problems that come with it. It's one of the reasons why people like me end up playing upper register stuff so often, is because it's the tenor in particular is in a range that is in competition with everybody else all the time. You're in that middle range where the toms are, the bass are, the guitar, the pads, the strings, the keyboards. And so you have to find a space where at least you can make a statement and sort of hear where you are, and then your ears will naturally find you no matter what range you're in. But that's another huge problem. It's really changed the way we approach the saxophone. Certainly we saw it with King Curtis, and we saw it with Junior Walker, and we've seen it with Dave Sanborn and Michael Brecker and Tom Scott and people like myself who are forced to play in those ranges because of the volumes on the stage. So that's a big area of discussion. And for saxophone players, we have to be careful. And imagine if you're a trumpet player, you're not going to have any chops by the second song. Yeah. And if you're a flute player or if you're a clarinet player, there's no hope. I mean, it's a war and you're not armed.
Yeah. So, no, and for sure. And the other thing too, you're talking about like certain elements of the rhythm section, but also the We're at the mercy of the sound person. And for a lot
Yes,
of people that listen to this podcast, they play on the weekends, they play in local places, local bars, that kind of thing. And many sound people don't have the experience of miking horns.
they don't. They do not. They don't understand it, and a lot of times they use microphones that are really not well equipped for that situation. They put them in strange places. It's really a problem. And so one of the things that we have to learn how to do is to bring our own microphone. If you're playing in a setting where there's going to be a lot of volume, you need something. If you're going to have a monitor, you need something that's going to block that sound coming from the back. So whether it's a Shure SM57 or a Beta 57 or something like that. I really like this microphone. It's crazy. It's made by a company called NUX. You can find it on Amazon. They're like $200.
Yep.
And those wireless microphones they sound great, and they really work. And I've carried them now to a lot of different places. I played them all over Latin America, all over the Florida, and other places in the U.S. And the engineers always come up and say, "That mic sounds great." And as long as you roll off about everything under 70 hertz, something like that, you won't get as much key noise. But that's a lifesaver. It's not a Neumann. It's not we're not in the studio. We're playing live, and it's really been a blessing. And they're about $200. And it's a really great microphone. And I've used the AMT, and I have one, and I love it a lot. But the problem is that the NUX is so well designed, because the case, you can charge it right from the case.
Yes.
And then the little adapter that goes to the mic cable, you can put that close to you so you don't have a problem with interference. And the clip is great. It doesn't come off. It's terrific. So there's that. And I love the Shure SM57. I love the Beta 57. I love the RE20, though that microphone requires the Electro Voice, the RE20. That microphone requires a lot of power. So they either need phantom power or they need a cloud lifter for that, because it just doesn't. They use it a lot in broadcasts, but it's a great microphone. And there are a lot of great microphone bands out there. In live settings, for me, the condenser mics don't work so well because they pick up everything. That's what they're designed to do. And so all of a sudden, you're going to get a lot of feedback, and you're going to get a lot of. They're doing their job. They're picking everything up, and they're great. But in a live setting, especially when you have a lot of volume like that, it doesn't work well. So that's an interesting. It's just, it's funny how we're talking about sound when we're saxophone players, but that's such a big problem for us, because it really steals from you your instrument. All of a sudden you can't play in the low register, you can't play in the middle register, you have to scream, you have to play in the altissimo. We're going to push, and we're either going to be flat or we're going to go sharp because we're biting or we're pressing, and it ruins the musicianship of it all. I have such respect for people that can do it regardless, but it isn't many, And I saw Dave Sanborn play recently, and he, thank God that they really take care of him and all that kind of stuff. But he's at a nice distance from the rhythm section, in particular, so that he can defend himself, because otherwise they're going to, knock him completely out of the room. And then they don't do it on purpose; they're just playing music. But it's something that we all have to be careful with, and these instruments are great. The little soprano thing, the curved soprano, the one advantage is that you actually have a monitor right here.
Yeah.
So you can actually hear yourself a little differently than you do on other things. But it's a never-ending battle with that stuff.
It for sure is, and it's so funny you're mentioning all the mics that I use. So I've been using AMT for 12 years now. Actually, yeah, I had the WI5, and now I have the Mini Quantum 7, and I do like it, but sometimes there's issues with that. It doesn't come through. Whatever. And AMT's are great mics.
Interference. Yeah, the interference. And for me, when I'm traveling, the biggest problem is the size of the unit, and then having to give the unit to the sound person, and then if you forget it, oh my goodness, you're not going to get that back right away, and all that stuff. But it's a great microphone. I mean, those are they're as good as they get. But for a lot of the younger musicians, and I lead the Diodario Academy in Latin America. I'm the head of that academy, which is a free learning center for musicians in all of Latin America and anywhere where they speak Spanish. And a lot of those musicians just don't have the money to buy an AMT. And so as a good starting place, I say to them, look, save your money, buy one of these. And I went to Guatemala, and there are 3 or 4 guys who bought it right the first day that I was there. They ordered it. I went to Argentina, same thing happened. Everywhere I go, it's happening, because there's a price issue with especially in the developing countries with that. And so these companies that are allowing us, they're democratizing really the music. What Melvin is doing with the saxophone, what everybody is trying to do is helping so many people who make music around the world, not just us rich Americans, everybody else as well. And I always think about them because I grew up poor, so I understand it.
Okay, and the microphone, just for everybody to know, it's the Nux B6, and
B6.
it comes in a beautiful like gray case that can be charged up. And it's so funny though. You said before, the one problem I have with that is the key noise. But like if you're playing, so let's say you're playing in a cover band or something like that, you don't even have a sound person. How do you said you roll off 70 hertz or something like that?
You just ask the sound person to when you play, when he does the sound check for you, you say, hey, can you do me a favor and roll off everything under 70 or even under 80? If you're playing alto, for example, everything under 80 hertz, because that's going to reduce the key sound tremendously. It's not going to eliminate it completely, but it's really going to help. You're not going to get any of the pop from low B flat or low C or any of that kind of stuff. So when you press down, you're not going to hear that, and it makes a huge difference. So that's going to help a lot. And then, in a live setting, there's so much other noise anyway that stuff is going to get minimized in that sound. But that's really going to help everybody a lot. With the tenor, I try to do it at around 70 hertz. With the alto, it can be 80 hertz. No problem. And with the soprano, 80 hertz, because we just don't get down that low with that stuff. But it's a blessing. And we get key noise anytime you have a clip-on of any kind. You get key noise, whether it's the AMT. So that same concept goes for the AMT. It goes for the AKG clip-ons, which are also great microphones. There's so much great stuff out there. I'm a fan of all the companies. I endorse certain things because I love them. I endorse all the Rico Reeds because that's what I played all my life, and they just work. I take one out, it plays. I don't have to worry about 3 or 4 or any of that kind of stuff. Jody, he's a lifesaver. Melvin, I love Melvin because what he's doing. I've been playing a Mark 6 tenor all my life. It's part of my DNA. Yeah. I have a lot of them, and I play them, and it's very difficult for me to change over now because the new instruments have a different construct, in particular with the size of the tone holes up in the upper stack. And it affects everything. I'd have to relearn the altissimo. I'd have to relearn the multiphonics. I'd have to change a lot of things. And at my age, I have pictures with Moses when he was parting the Red Sea. At my age, we're sitting there together. There was a guy drawing us. When we're doing those things, it's very difficult at this point in your life to relearn those things. But at the same time, I played Melvin's Revelation alto and sopranos. Oh my goodness, they're unbelievable, those horns. And then I played his flute. It's got these beautiful oboes there. He's got clarinets. He's got everything. He's got great trumpets. So he's really making it possible for the new generation to afford instruments and learn how to play. And that, for me, that's really important because people who are my heroes were very kind to me and reached out and helped me, starting with people like Michael Brecker and Dizzy Gillespie and Arturo Sandoval and Chick Corea and the rest of them. We could go on for hours telling you stories about the kind of human beings that these people are. Dave Sanborn, Bob Shepard. They're just great human beings and incredibly helpful, and have always been there to support people like me. And my job is now to help support the next generation of musicians and save them some tears and some sweat and some curse words and some extra hours in the practice room. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I definitely see that for sure. And you know what? Let's get into, because I'm very curious about this. So you grew up in Venezuela, and let's get into your background, how you got into music and, your mentors. So take us from the very beginning. When did you first start playing any instrument?
It was by accident. I grew up in Venezuela, and my parents are both from Spain. My whole family's from Spain. I lived in Spain for a while. I lived in San Sebastian for a few years, then I went back to Venezuela. My father was a great musician. He was a great pianist. He spoke 5 languages, had perfect pitch, had all that kind of stuff.
Oh, wow.
My mom always sang around the house, and I was always singing and making up songs in the back of the car in Venezuela and in Spain. I don't know how they didn't go crazy, because I was always just was just part of my everyday thing. But I came to America. We came to America. My father got a job working for Viasa, the airlines, because he was great with languages and with math, and so he was working in the cargo department there because of all the international stuff that was going on in Miami. And one day they sent home a form about if your child wants to play in band. And back then, with my father was very strict. I grew up in a very strict kind of European household. And he said to me, he said, "Would you like to play an instrument?" And I said, "I don't know." And he said, What instrument do you like?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "What about the saxophone?" I said, "Okay." I had no idea. I mean, I was just saying yes because that's what you said to your father. And I went to middle school. That was my first experience playing an instrument of any type. And from the first day that I played the saxophone, I kind of had it was just an identifiable kind of sound. It wasn't probably very good at the beginning, but it was very identifiable. And it seemed to make sense. And the one thing that it did for me was that I've always been kind of a nerd, as you can tell by the doctorate, and I love math and all that kind of stuff. So in school, I came to America. I didn't speak English. I learned how to speak English here. I was always a little bit heavy set or a chubby kid. I see pictures of me young. I wasn't fat, but by today's standards, and so I was shy. And what the saxophone did was it gave me a voice. It gave me an ability to talk with other people and be part of a community of people. And that's how it happened. And from the very beginning, it just kind of, music made sense. To me, music was math. If you look at the staff, the staff is an XY graph. Time is the X. It's going from left to right. And the notes, the frequencies, the pitches are the Y. And so for me, it made perfect sense. It was like, oh, okay, I'm looking at an XY graph because I'm a math guy. And then right from the very beginning, I could always tell kind of what chord it was. I could always sense like, oh, that's a major chord, that's a minor chord. I'm playing a G. Well, that G is actually the fifth of this chord. It just kind of makes sense. It made sense. I had great teachers. I had a man, Charles Foster, who was my junior high band director. He was on the Midway, serving on the Midway on the ship when it sank. A lot of his friends were eaten by sharks and all that stuff. Nice man, went to Indiana, great French horn player. And Vince Ricci, who was my orchestra teacher, went to Berkeley and was a very good jazz bass player. And these two guys became like my second father. My father died when I was very young. I was 16 when he passed away. And these guys became like my second fathers. And in music, I found a piece. I found a voice. I found something that was fun to do. I didn't practice at all. I never practiced a day in my life until I was 19 years old.
Wow.
Ever. Never. I played in band. That was it. I did homework. I did math. I played ball with kids outside. I did the kinds of things that kids always do. I love academics, so I did that. At 19, I auditioned for the University of Miami. From the time I was very young, I was maybe 14, people started to call me to play in bands, church bands. And then back then, it wasn't a drinking age like there is now. There was 21, but I could play in a bar. So I was about 14, 15 playing with people who were much older, 30 and 40. And I was playing the saxophone. I could always improvise a little bit. Wasn't very good, but I was, improvising. And I was playing. And people started to ask me to record things. At the time when I started, I also played trumpet. And I played mellophone, and I played flute and clarinet. And I played a lot of different things. And so I would go and record for people, and I would play all the instruments. And it was fun for me to do that. And so I started recording very, very young. Had a very unique kind of approach to playing, had a unique kind of sound, and people that. So by the time I was in high school, I was working on weekends playing music. And I could make more money doing that than I could working where my other friends were working at grocery stores and
That's right.
Fast food places and things like that. So I decided that I was going to study music and go to the University of Miami. My mother bet against it because my mom still didn't speak English at the time. She never did. She was from Spain, and she had grown up very poor, lived through the Spanish Civil War, through the World Wars, all that kind of stuff. And she was afraid I would starve to death. Well, obviously that didn't happen. But when I went to the University of Miami, I had never taken a lesson. I had never practiced, but I could sight read anything.
Mm.
And so when I went to audition at the university, they had me play some changes, some chord changes, and I had no idea what that stuff was. I used to call it alphabet soup. I wouldn't know the difference between a A7 chord and an A7 flat 9 chord. I knew what an A7 was, but I didn't know what was going on. I just played by ear, and the ear isn't always well trained by that point. So in my transcript, Whit Seidner, who was the director, showed me after I got my master's. He showed me when I was getting my master's. He said to me, he said, when you first auditioned here, they wrote in big red letters, they said, this kid will never play jazz.
Wow.
And they weren't going to let me in, except that they put me in a room to sight read, and they had me sight read some stuff. And I've always, I'm very low key, and I don't get mad. But when I know how to do something, you don't want to challenge me on it because it's going to be a long day for you. And so they had me sight read this stuff, and I started sight reading, and I could sight read anything. And the teachers, like the professor who was doing it, who by the way is Gary Lindsay, who ends up being the saxophone, the great orchestrator, great writer, and in the saxophone quartet, the Miami Saxophone Quartet. So the first time I ever met him was in this audition room, and so he's putting stuff up, and he says, "Hey, can you sight read this? And have you ever played this before?" And I said, "No." So he pulls up another book. There's a big stack of books like this on a stand, and so it happens about 3 or 4 times. Have you ever seen this before? And at this point now, I'm starting to get offended. I'm like, "No, I haven't seen it before." So he pulls something up. I said, "No." And so, okay. I said, "You want it in a different key?" And he said, "What?" I said, "Yeah, do you want it in a different key?" It's like, "Okay, go ahead." So I played it in a different key because I had learned how to transpose in junior high. My band director, because I was always making stuff up and always driving him crazy, he would send me to, if there wasn't a French horn player that day, I would go play the French horn part, or the baritone horn part, or the trombone part, or the bassoon part, or the clarinet part. So I knew how to transpose.
Oh, cool.
And so they do it again. He pulls out another book, and I said, "You want it in another key?" He says, "Sure, go ahead." And I played it twice as fast, just to piss him off. And so he said, "Excuse me, I'll be right back." And he went up to see Whit Seidner, and he said to Whit, he said, "Look, I got this kid in here. He doesn't have a clue about jazz, but he's really weird. He did this and this and this and this." And Whit told me, he said to him, "Let him in." And that was it. And I spent my first year taking classes and doing all that stuff. I still wasn't practicing. And that summer, Gary Lindsay was in the practice room. I had decided that I was going to practice and I was going to get better. And he was practicing. I said, "Hey, would you mind if I took a lesson from you?" And so I took a lesson from him, and he played me a tape, cassette of Michael Brecker playing Invitation at Montreux Jazz Festival, just he and David Roitstein, who's a good friend of mine. He's the head of Cal Arts in LA. And it changed my life. I had never heard the saxophone played that way. I had never heard music played that way. I had heard Coltrane. I had heard Charlie Parker. I didn't understand it. But there was something about Michael's playing because it was rooted in R&B. And I got to know that much later because we got to be friends, and he was very nice to me all his life and taught me a lot of things, and we spent a lot of time talking about things. And he said, "You and I have a lot in common. We could have done a lot of other things because we like academics and all that." He said, "And we also like pop music." I said, "Yeah, I love pop music. I'm not a jazz police guy. I like all music. I grew up listening to zarzuela, for example, which is like Spanish opera. I grew up listening to Mantovani and folkloric Venezuelan music. I listened to people like Rafael and Julio Iglesias as a kid in Spain, the great, crooners of that time. I don't think I heard Frank Sinatra till I was in my third year of college when I had to actually play with him live. It was the first time I'd like, oh, wow, this is good music. But I decided that I was going to learn how to play the saxophone, and I went in and I started practicing literally 12 to 16 hours a day, and I was playing every night. So I would play all day. I would record myself working on different things. I would listen to it in the car and make notes about all the stuff that I was doing wrong, which was everything. And then I would go play at night, 6 nights a week. Back then there was live music everywhere, and I was playing in a band that is today Gloria's band. It's the Miami Sound Machine. We had a band called The Company, It
Wow.
was the University of Miami Concert Jazz Band Rhythm Section, and I and a guy named John Lovell, who's a great trumpet player who plays with Jimmy Buffett. I
Wow.
was doing a record with Jimmy Buffett, and Jimmy said to me, he said, "Hey, I'm looking for somebody who plays percussion and trumpet." I said, "I know the guy." I said, "Look, he doesn't play the congas, but you got to call him because the percussion that he does play, he does it better than anybody in the world. And he plays the afuche and he plays the shakers and he doesn't." And he came down to Jimmy's place, auditioned, and he's been in the band ever since. At the time, John was working selling stuff at a electronics store. Incredible trumpet player, just a great person, great friend. We played together for years. And that band, the company, I was working with some incredible musicians, and I was learning something every day. I had to learn how to sing. I had to learn how to play keyboards. I had to sing background vocals and lead vocals, and I was writing arrangements, and we were transcribing a lot of pop tunes and playing a lot of solos. And if the room was empty at night, I could play a solo on a all night long on the song All Night Long. I could play a solo that was 15 minutes and nobody would complain. So I was experimenting with all this crazy stuff, and it was really a great time in my life. And all I did really was play music. The only time I would go to class was to take a test. I would study and take a test. So I was skipping, and that has continued. I then I sort of, after about one summer really was a transformation for me. I really figured out a lot of things, not enough, but I figured out enough things where I could almost play a little bit. And then it was just a consistent every day, all day long. I'm still working at it right now. I'm sitting here practicing a variety of pentatonic scales and all the different applications of those scales on all the different chords from all the different positions, including all the ones that belong to the modal stuff, working on side slipping and working on things in major thirds and the things that we all work on vocabulary, the things that nobody really wants to hear. They're not the things that the audience wants to hear. They're the things that musicians want to hear. But it's the greatest joy in life is to study music. Is to try to learn how to play the saxophone, to try to become a better musician. There's a great video by John Williams where they're re-recording some of the NBC theme stuff, and they're interviewing him, and he says, music is a strange world because we are trying to do something that's impossible. We are trying to be perfect, and perfection is not achievable. And when I hear him say it, for me, he's perfect. And when you hear somebody like that say it, you realize that we're all in the same boat. We're all together, studying and learning, and we're always learning something new. And there's always something more to learn, and somebody else that you hear that inspires you, or that you say, "Wow, that was cool. What was that?" And it can be on anything. It can be on guitar. It can be on trumpet. I love Woody Shaw. I love Arturo Sandoval. I spent more than 20 years with him next to me playing. I call him. He's the other guy with the S on his chest. There's Superman, and then there's Sandoval. And it's just the trumpet's a different instrument, and they come about it from a different place. And he does things that have really influenced me, and he's borrowed some things from me. Not many, but he's borrowed a few from me, and we have a great relationship. And I'm always learning something. He's a master of breathing. He's a master of articulation. He's a master of technical facility. Things like that really inspire you. And unfortunately for us, Coltrane, Charlie Parker, Stan Getz, Kirk Whalum, Zoot Zims, they all wore an extra. They all wear an extra. And so we have a very high bar to aspire to with those things. Bob Berg, may he rest in peace. I have a picture with him here in the studio that I was carrying. Michael, David Sanborn, Ben Webster, Coleman Hawkins. They're all ridiculously brilliant. Stanley Turrentine, who could play blues on anything, including giant steps. People have asked me to do that because I study his stuff, and it's like we are so blessed and we are so hampered by the fact that all these geniuses have been doing it for so long, and we're just trying to learn what they do. Wynton and Bramford, you're like, okay, all right. So let me go back in the practice room. I'll see you in a couple of years. But it's just that's the way it is. It's a wonderful thing, and let's not even talk about the guitar players, Benson and the rest of them, and what a blessing it is. And for all the saxophone players who are listening to this podcast, we all go through the same thing. We all hate everything we play. We all think we're terrible. We all know we need to practice more. We all suffer with issues with motivation, with the metronome and the tape recorder and the intonation and oh my gosh, I'll never be able to do that. And then you do that, and then you strive for something else. And the plateaus, how you get to that, you're improving, and all of a sudden you hit the wall.
Yes.
You're like, how do I get out of this? And should I play out of a book? Should I play out of? The answer to everything is yes. You should study everything and be open-minded and learn the piano and learn everything. And there's always stuff to learn from everybody. A lot of times I see people that will listen to a young player or somebody who doesn't play great or might not do one thing very well, and they'll chuckle. And I'm like, it's a great opportunity to find out what they do well and figure out what they're doing well and borrow that. And then figure out what they're doing wrong and avoid doing that. And then if you can help them without offending them, then do that. And if we all do that, Brecker did that for me. Eddie Daniels did that for me. Sandoval did that for me. Chucho Valdez has done that for me. Tom Dowd, who recorded Giant Steps, he's the engineer on Giant Steps, one of the great producers. He did that for me. Phil Ramone did that for me. There's no offense when somebody says, "Hey, try this." It's not like, "Oh, you don't like what I'm doing?" It's like, "Oh yeah, I'll be happy to try that. Let me see if I can learn a new way to do something." And that it's such a beautiful thing, because in music, my attitude towards music is that music is a service organization. We provide a service, and we're there to serve the song, the music, the production, the artist, the engineer, the legacy of our instrument, ourselves, so that we don't embarrass ourselves. But we're there to make music with other people. There was I was talking with Michael in Japan about intonation, and we were laughing about how the saxophone is so unruly. You'll have a reed that one day plays all the notes like you think they're good, and then the next day that reed goes sideways and everything's out. And he said, yeah. He said, I told him, I said, Whitsidner told me that you had said to him that, or he had said that playing in tune is playing out of tune in a controlled manner. And Michael said to me, he says, yeah, that's right. He said, if I'm playing with a trumpet player and they're playing low C sharp, I know that they're going to be a quarter of a step sharp. If they're not a great trumpet player, they're going to be sharp. So I can do one of two things. I can either lift that note up and be in tune and get along, or I can say, well, this is where the note is, and we're going to sound like not so good. Yeah. And I laughed, because that's the way the saxophone is. I'm always going to follow the trombone player. They usually have better pitch than we do. Always going to follow the trumpet player because they're the leader. Whether I like it or not, they're the leader. The singer, always cautious of if I'm playing the same note that the singer is, that I have to match their note. It's not a contest. It's a society. It's a fraternity. It's a group effort. It's a team. And so that part of music is beautiful. I think it's one of the most beautiful things about music, and it's one of the things about music education, that musicians understand how to speak and listen and communicate with other people in a way that the average person does not. And for that reason, it's not a coincidence that people like Bill Clinton, who was a very good saxophone player, is a very good saxophone player, could have been a great saxophone player, made a good president. He could listen and he could speak, or a great president. I mean, I'm a big fan of his. It's just that nature that we have in us from music is really important. And I hope that we as musicians pass it on to the rest of the generations, and that we use it every day, and that we encourage other people to use those skills.
Yeah, wow, there's so much to unpack here, and just, all the advice that you shared. I'm curious about this. So you said you never practiced when you were younger until maybe 19. Looking back at that now, do you regret that? Do you feel like no, not at all. Okay.
You know why? Because I wouldn't have known what to practice. Okay. I would have picked up some book and some the the universal method for sax, and learned an 8-bar thing, and maybe it would have helped my fingers for a minute, or maybe I would have felt like I learned something. But I come from the school of learning that says that people learn what they want and need to learn.
Yeah.
And I've taught at the community college for about 25 years. And so I've had a lot of experience with people who are very often not quite ready for college work and need a lot of kind of help getting there, and they all learn. But the interesting thing is that when we provide them information in a way that makes sense to them and a way that they can use it, all of a sudden it becomes important to them and they really learn. And so one of the things for me is about making music. I don't want to play a melody that's written on a piece of paper. I want to play a melody that I hear in my heart or I hear in my head, and play it in a way that's unique. And so when I was a kid, I was doing that already. Had I started practicing, it probably would have taken that completely away from me. I would have become more robotic, and that wasn't good. When I started practicing at 19, I knew exactly where I wanted to go. I knew that I liked funk, and that I liked rock, and that I liked pop, and that I listened to Chicago and Earth, Wind and Fire, and that I loved great pop songs, and that I loved jazz, and I liked Latin music and bossa novas, and I loved Tchaikovsky, and I loved Debussy. And all of a sudden, I could apply whatever it was that I was practicing to what I wanted to use in music. It wasn't just somebody saying, here, learn this exercise. Well, why am I learning that exercise? And then as there's a new book out by Share Music. It's a great book. It's Michael Brecker's notes that he.
I was going to talk to you about that. Yes.
Yeah, it's a great book. It's all. I just got it a day ago, and I was looking through it. I have some stuff of Michael's that he gave me personally that I cherish, because I just never share it, never made copies of it, never did anything, because I almost didn't look at it for many years because I felt guilty about that. I felt like if I was going to learn stuff from him, I needed to learn it like everybody else, not because he had given it to me. But I kept the same thing. I kept a notebook. Unfortunately, it was at my mom's house. She's gone now, but I kept a notebook. Mine was very different. Mine was very mechanical. The mechanical stuff. The great saxophone players, whether they're playing classical, whether they're playing jazz, are great instrumentalists. They're virtuosos. They're all incredible virtuoso saxophonists. And so I realized at a young age that the best way to get that was with a metronome and a tape recorder. Even back then, back in the early 80s, when we didn't have all this technology. And what I did was I was fanatical. My scales exercise, because I would go through all of them. I'm talking about melodic minor, not the traditional one, but the melodic minor that we use in jazz, which is just the ascending form in both directions, because the chords don't change when they're voicing, whether we're going up or down. But all the pentatonics, all the chromatic, the augmented scales, the diminished scale, the majors, in thirds, fourths, fifths, sixths, sevens. That routine got to be 2.5 hours after I was able to really learn how to play it. But at first, I was playing all the scales at eighth notes at 60 BPM, and I was so fanatical when I first, because I was so frustrated with myself, that I would get to a scale like F sharp, and if I made a mistake, I'd go back. And I'd go all the way back to the beginning and do it again. Well, every day during the summer, I was able to move the metronome up a couple of clicks. In some cases, I could go up 4, 6, 8, depending on what it was. But what it did was it gave me a lifetime of dexterity that to this day, I'm still working on some things. And, ring fingers, these are always slow. The piano's a big help. And there's always some things that over time we get sloppy about. The fundamentals. I love sports. I love watching the spring training or watching the football teams train and going through the fundamentals. But I kept a record of that. And what I learned was that if you're moving the metronome up 2 ticks every day, at the end of the week, if you're doing 5 or 6 days, it's 10 ticks. In a month, that's 40. In 3 months, it's 120. So you go from 60 to 180. You've tripled your facility in 3 months. Now, all of a sudden, things that I want to play, I can play. All of a sudden, I want to play an F sharp pentatonic scale on an E flat minor chord. And it comes out without any problem, and I can play it in any direction and in all kinds of places at tempos that I couldn't play before. And so that notebook became very important. And then I kept a notebook of ideas, of patterns, like Michael did, just mine, because I came from a very different world. I was not exposed to jazz as early as he was. I had to learn very basic stuff, and there are great books out there. Whether it's the books by David Baker, or there are a lot of jazz patterns where you learn a 2-bar phrase and all that kind of stuff. And the trick always is to learn everything in all 12 keys and to change them around so they sound like you. It's very interesting about that. And I'm sorry I'm talking so much, but I guess there's a lot to share.
Yeah, this is great.
I was doing something in Utah. I have lots of friends in Utah. I go there and play often. And Slide Hampton and I were playing a clinic. We were the guest artists on this thing. And Slide was in the room next to me, and I could hear this trombone practicing early in the morning. And so it sounded like it didn't sound so good. So I thought, I wonder if he's okay. So I knocked on his door, and he was playing into a towel so he wouldn't bother anybody.
Wow.
Kind of person he was, and he's an older guy and just a brilliant musician. And we had to play giant steps together, as a cappella thing. We did, and all this stuff. And he said to me, he said, Coltrane would have liked you. I would have loved you. I said, no, I loved Coltrane. He said, no, it's your work ethic. You really do study the music. He said, let me tell you about Coltrane. He said, we grew up, or we were at one time had a house where all these musicians would congregate, including Eric Dolphy and he and Coltrane and everybody else. And he said, and Coltrane was the only guy who he would listen to other people, and he would walk up to them and he'd say, hey, what did you just play? Can you show me that? This is Coltrane. And the person would, of course, would be like, it was this, And Coltrane would say, do that again. And he'd play it. And he said, oh, thanks. And then Coltrane would go in the corner and he'd learn it in all 12 keys.
Wow.
Slide Hampton told me that. That's dedication. That's humility. That's the pursuit of excellence that he left behind for us, that none of us will ever be able to catch up. But that those kind of lessons, and when you get them firsthand from people like Slide, it changes your life. It really does change your life. You realize that you never stop learning. Fortunately or unfortunately, we have 3 children. We have twin daughters and my son, and I'm a dad and a husband first. Only been married once, only going to be married once. I'm very lucky. I come from the old school. Family comes first, everything else is second. So one of our daughters was born with an infant cataract, and that means that she has ambulatory vision out of one eye. They're fraternal. The other one, no problem. So I had an offer to teach at a university, and because of the health insurance, I've always taught and always liked it. But because of the health insurance, I did that, and I've taught school for about 25 years. And during those 25 years, I play all the time. I record almost every day. I do a lot of things, but I haven't had the chance to practice the way that I need to practice. Only when I go on the road with Arturo and I get to go to the venue early and play for a few hours and just work on things. Weekends, and when I'm recording, I'll always do 6 or 7 takes of something just so that I can practice. I send the people 6 or 7 or 3 or 4 or 5 takes of the same thing. They're like, why do you send me so many takes? I'm like, just so you have options. I don't really care what they do. I don't care what parts they pick, how they comp it. It doesn't matter to me. It's their music, but it gives me a chance to practice, to try it from different approaches, from different things. So now I'm back to that. I'm going to retire early next year, and I've really been working at the saxophone again, even at after 60, because there's nothing better than music, and there's nothing better than trying to get better at it. I don't play very well. I have a lot to learn, but it's a work in progress. We're all a work in progress, and we just keep trying to learn. And if we do that, we'll run out of time. God will call us, and it'll be time to go home. And we'll run out of time, but it will have been a life well lived in that respect. I wish we had more time. I wish we had 3 or 4 lifetimes. and we could travel in time and go take a lesson with Debussy and go take a lesson
Oh
with
yeah.
Stravinsky.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And, you know what I mean? Hang out with Coltrane, hang out with Charlie Parker,
Yeah.
or Clifford Brown. I've had a chance to hang with Arturo and Chick and Dave Weckl and Kirk and I just did some stuff recently. Um, so many great players. There are just so many brilliant people. Peter Erskine. Everybody's going to teach you something. I learn a lot from drummers. I learned that saxophone players tend to drag, and that they don't like it when we do that, so they make us play the time. Um, it's great. It's a beautiful thing. I really thank you for doing this, for giving us a space to sort of share our thing and learn from each other. It's a beautiful thing that you're doing. That's great.
No, thank you. And first of all, I think many people would disagree that you're not good. Okay, so I'm just going to say that. But anyway, I like to do this because I want to expose people to many different people in the saxophone world, and I also want to help companies as well, like Melvin, like Jody, like 10M fan mouthpiece, like all these retro revival, all these types of things, because to help. There's so much out there that, people need to know about, and we're all here, yeah, in service of the music. I totally agree with you about that. It's not a competition. It's unfortunately, you Facebook can be great for a lot of things, but can also really wreck you because, so many people are just so negative nowadays. And, you had mentioned before about people chuckling when they hear other people, that's not the way it is. That's just not the way it is. People that are the best musicians are the most humble, yourself especially included, where it's about the music. It's not about, how great, you may think that person is, they're trying something, they're experimenting with something, and they're expressing themselves. That's the bottom line. And one thing I'm really curious about, from the then to the now, how did you? I'm so fascinated by the fact that you didn't practice and how you worked on tone and all that kind of thing when you first started out, but then also leading to now after the injury. How are you dealing with like tone and stuff like that? How have you adapted your breathing? Yeah, how have you adapted your breathing to be able to, play saxophone with this kind of injury?
It's really been it's been very hard. I have to always now remember, for many years, I didn't have to worry about breathing. All I had to do was think that I wanted to play a phrase for X amount of time, and I could play as long as I wanted. I had ridiculous air capacity.
Oh.
Now I really have to concentrate on breathing down all the way to not only the diaphragm, but really trying to get air all the way into my back, if possible, so that I have this the right amount. I've had to change phrasing. In some ways, that's been good because I play a little shorter phrases now that can be a little more palatable. Because otherwise, you can tend to run on, and it gets kind of old. But I'm very thankful for Jody. I mean, this is a guy who we met. He liked the way I played, and I told him what was happening, and he said, come to Savannah. I want to bring you to the jazz festival. Come here, spend time with me. Let's get this right. And it allowed me to play because I get so depressed about it that sometimes I just want to quit. I just want to give up because I don't want to embarrass myself. So what the stuff that you're doing, God bless you for what you're doing. You mentioned Retro Revival, Bob Shepard. The guys are good friends of mine. I promised that I would play their horn. I did some stuff with Victory, but the tenor is just not my thing. The alto and the soprano are great. But if I can help them, I don't need the endorsement. I don't need a new horn. I don't need a free horn. But if I can help anybody, I'm gonna do it because everybody has helped me along the way. The thing with the breathing now is it's a struggle every day. And right now I'm on a major diet. I've been fat for too long. I tell people I've been pregnant for too long. I've just been fat for too long and allowed myself to stay that way. So I've lost about 30 pounds now.
Awesome.
I'm going to get down to a weight that is human, because Michael said this to me, and I talk about him a lot because he's my idol, and he was. I have to tell this story here because a lot of people don't know it. But at the Jocko concert, the Jocko birthday concert, he was playing with a big band, a friend of mine, Peter Graves, who I've worked with all my career, and the guys in the band were older than I. One of them just passed away, Neil Bonsani, great friends of mine, and he's Peter said, I know you're a big Michael Brecker fan and a Jocko fan, and I knew Jocko. He said, why don't you come to the sound check and spend some time, and maybe you get a chance to talk to Michael. And so I did. And on the break, Michael was sitting over in a corner, and he was standing in a corner, and I had brought a stack of transcriptions that I had done. It's a notebook like this of his. Not all of them were very good, but I had done my best. And I walked up to him and I tapped him on the shoulder, up high like that. And he looked down at me, and I mean, I'm not that short, but he was 6'6", 6'7". So I hand him this notebook, and he starts leafing through it, and he gave me this weird look, like, this kid's you're whacked. Like, what are you doing transcribing? So he said, imagine the kind of human being this guy is. He says to me, he says, wait 1 second. Doesn't know me from Adam. Goes in the back. I see him grab a book. He comes out. He says, look, take this, make a Xerox, and bring it back to me tonight. He said, it's the only copy of it that there is. It's not going to get published because they couldn't get the rights. It was a book that somebody had done in Japan. So here's Michael Brecker with this 19-year-old kid, gives me this book. I go across the street, find a place, I make Xeroxes, I bring it back to him that night. And that night, his grandparents came and they checked him into rehab. He was going through a lot of things. And that summer, I was on tour with a concert jazz band from the University of Miami, along with Rick Margitza and Joel McNeely and a bunch of great players. And Michael was on all the shows. And so I was sitting in the front row, and we talked, and we spent time together with Rick and I, and we got to be friends. And every time he'd come to Miami, we'd hook up. Every time I go to New York, we'd hook up. I was in Japan with Bobby Caldwell. I go up to my hotel room. My phone rings. It's like, hey, what you doing? I'm like, who's this? It's Michael. It's like, I thought it was you. He says, come on, let's go downstairs. We spent a week together talking about everything, about music, about life, about the rehab, about, the body. And he said to me, he said, I take time every day now to work out because I realize that your body is your temple and that you have to take care of it. And I didn't listen to him then, and I'm listening to him now. I miss him every day, but I listen to him now. So it's time to do that. But all of that goes to the breathing. And for all of us who are anybody out there who is watching the thing and is dealing with weight like I do, we have to work on it. We have to exercise. We have to do all those things because the saxophone is very physical, especially when we're playing in these loud environments, and we're out there giving it 100% and running around the stage like crazy people and doing all those things that we do. It's very important. But what I ended up doing, here's another guy. I was with the sax quartet doing a concert. I was very frustrated with my breathing because in the sax quartet, that's really hard. And I'm still playing the Jody. I'm not playing like a classical mouthpiece or any of that kind of stuff, but we play a lot of jazz. And Dave Liebman was on the clinic with us, and he was in the audience listening. And so Dave came backstage, and Dave and I have known Dave for a long time. He came to he's really a great mentor and a great friend. And I said to him, Dave, I'm so upset with my air and with my sound and with my breathing. And he said to me, he said, you'd never notice it from the outside. He said, your sound is great. He said, you don't have a problem. I said, yeah, but blah. He said, don't forget that whenever you have an issue, just go back and do your overtones. And that became a obsession for me. Not the whole series, just the first three. Middle B flat, F, and B flat. I don't worry about D and F because I can play in the stratosphere. I don't care. Because the real sound of the saxophone is right there. If you can make that F sing when you play it with the harmonic, and then you can make it sing the same way with the first finger, job done. The rest of it is almost like a trick. That harmonic, that second harmonic, is the saxophone. It rings, you can feel it. It changes your physiology. So now every day, and whenever I get bugged with my sound, I always think of Dave Liebman, and I always go back to the overtone. And he's right. And there's a master saxophonist, another guy who for no reason has always been my friend. He's always been my mentor. You meet people like this in your life. God puts them there. Bob Berg and Dave Sanborn, and he puts them there for you for no reason. And Chick Corea and Arturo Sandoval. And I'm lucky, I'm blessed to have people like that who have walked me through the valley of death in a way. Jody. And now it's all of our jobs, like what you're doing. It's our responsibility to do it for everyone else. If we can help, do no harm. If we can help them, that's what we're going to do. And for me, it's been a journey, and it's a struggle. And there are days where I'm really frustrated. I get real tired real fast. I don't have energy. I used to be indestructible. Now I'm very destructible. But God does things for a reason, and I trust in Him, and everything else will work out okay.
Because the fact of the matter is that all the recordings that you have out, all the people that you've played with, that inspires everybody else. And just know, I'm just going to say this, just know that your body of work and everything that you've done, keep that in mind to let that inspire you to keep moving forward. Because motivation, you talked about it very early on. We all suffer through bouts of motivation, lack of motivation, whatever. But one thing that most people don't do, and I think musicians too, you don't look at the wins, so like I coach small groups and stuff like that. And we always start off with what are the wins for the week. Now I've been in business groups. I hated that stuff. I thought it was woo woo, that kind of thing. But you know what I mean, right? I'm like, come on, really?
Yes.
Just let's get to it, for God's sakes. But you know what? I get it now. And I have to do this too for myself as well, because I'm always like pedal to the metal 24/7 all the time. But just take a step back. And what was one big win that you had this past week? Or what was one big win for yesterday? And for some people, a win could be, because they're so crazy busy all the time, was that they had 5 minutes to play the horn. And that's a win. And it's huge.
Amen. That's a win. And all of us who play the saxophone and who play music think when we don't play it, we are not the same. It is in our cell structure. It's a physiological thing. Music is a vibration. And when we're not making music on a regular basis, our whole existence is hampered. It's disturbed in a very negative way. And as you said, we live in a society that is so negative and so wanting to criticize and punish, and we're looking for vengeance, and we're looking for everything's messed up. Music isn't messed up, and we can't let us mess up the music. There is never a space for us to laugh at a student or someone who is having a rough day. What we want to do is support them. I work with a lot of young people. I volunteer at a lot of schools. I do those things, and I'll go to play with a group. I had to do a recording the other day with a bunch of high school kids, and they wanted me to play a solo. And so I played a little solo, but I stopped and I said, I'm not here to play the solo. I'm here to help him play the solo. And after the kid did it a couple times, and I was able to help him with a couple of little things, you could just see his whole body change, his whole aura changed. Like, it's about empowering everybody else. No one did it better than Coltrane. Coltrane left behind a body of information, the likes of which we will never be able to figure out and master. But what he did was he said, look, here it is. You pick what you like and you go that way. And everybody who's influenced by him, myself included, goes a different direction because of that. And so I'm thankful that I'm very thankful for all the people that have given me an opportunity to make music with them. It's my greatest honor in life to spend time, playing a solo for Frank Sinatra or Shakira or Gloria Estefan or you know, Arturo Sandoval or whoever. They're all, to me, they're all geniuses. They're all brilliant, and the fact that they invite you to make music with them is the biggest honor anybody could get. The great thing is that I've always understood that wherever I go, my job is to learn something. And so if I'm recording with the Bee Gees, I'm checking out their vibrato, I'm checking out their falsetto, I'm checking out their sense of pitch and their time. I'm not there to say, oh, look, I'm going to play a solo. Do you like it? It's like, I just want to play the music. And if I do that, I'm going to be okay, you know. And then I get depressed because I hear it back and I don't like it. And then I, you know, go home and practice and work on it. But the greatest thing in the world is that we have these incredible role models that are out there that are making music for us, and there are a lot of them. You know, there are a lot. I'm a fan of just so many people. Whether it's Dave Koz, who I know, and I, you know, we're friendly, and we've talked, and he came to New York to hear us at the Blue Note, and I spent time with him, and I have great respect for him. Or Kirk, who's my buddy, and we're very close, and I love him to death. Or Sam Warren, who, you know, he's like a father figure or a big brother figure. They're all learning. They're always learning, and they're all teaching, and they all empower us through their work. And you certainly hope that through your life you can do the same for other people. And my responsibility is to become better, so that I can do that better. And it's never about applause. It's never about fame. It's never about being number one on a chart. It's never about any of those things. I could care less. It makes no difference. In fact, my favorite place to play is church. I play for God. I'm not playing for the charts. The rest of it is very simple. It's just a everyday kind of, and what you said, the wins. You know, a small win every day will add up to a lot of wins, and it'll change your life. It'll change your career.
Yeah, just that's so incredibly inspiring what you just said, and your outlook, you know, and in service of the music. You've said that a couple of times, and that's what I was just actually writing notes about. In service of the music, that's what you're doing. And I'm curious about this because people would probably ask this too. You know, from an early age, you started playing shows and stuff like that. Did you ever get nervous? If you did,
No.
you know, especially the first time, like you were asked maybe to, you know, play with somebody huge like a Gloria Estefan or something like that.
No. The only time I ever got nervous was the very first time I played a solo for an audience. It was the only time my father ever heard me play. I had to play Misty with a school band, and when I finished, people stood up and clapped, and I thought they didn't like it. So I started to cry. And my band director turned to me and he said, no, that's really good when that happens. And I said to him, I thought they were mad. Wow. It was the only time I got nervous. I never get nervous playing, because the audience or the expectation for me doesn't exist. The expectation is my own. I hold myself to a standard that is probably higher than one that anybody else is going to hold me to. So I know that what Vince Lombardi and Coach Don Shula said, I had a chance to spend time speak to Don Shula, but he said, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And I've been lucky all my life because I've always tried to be prepared, and I've had a lot of people give me opportunities, and I never want to let them down. More than, I don't go in there because I want to impress somebody. I don't go in there because I want to show them that I can do this or that. I just don't want to let them down. I don't want them to call me and then have to say, oh, well, sorry, we can't use it. That would hurt my feelings. That would be depressing. But I just don't want to let them down. I didn't want to let my father down. I didn't want to let my mother down. The reason I have a doctorate degree in education, and my specialty is in remedial mathematics, but is because I promised my parents that I would finish school, that I would become a learned person, because they didn't have the opportunity to do that. And for Hispanic people around the world, I wanted to say to them, look, we have a responsibility to each other to lift ourselves up and to show people that we're capable of everything that everybody else is capable of, in the music and outside the music. So I think it's that. It's more about not letting other people down. You never want to let the people that you play with in your band. You never want to let them down. The sax quartet, you don't want to let them down. It's that, and puts a lot of pressure on you.
I was just about to say that. Wouldn't that put more pressure on you? And couldn't that, in a sense, for some people, make them even more nervous?
Yeah, it could make you nervous, or what it could make you is driven.
Mm-hmm.
I think more than anything, it makes you driven, and certainly there are going to be days where we don't live up to it. There are going to be days when I'm doing stuff with the sax quartet where I have I miss something, or I don't play it as well as I should have played it, or I don't like that solo, and so I know that I have to keep working on it. That's just it. But we're human. We can't be perfect. We would like to be. Some people are pretty close, but we're not perfect, and we're not going to be, and that's okay. Sometimes it's funny. If you record yourself a lot, like when you're playing in a club, you're playing in a band, practicing and stuff, sometimes the things that you're like, oh, that wasn't good, let me do it again. And then you listen to it back, and because it was something that you didn't expect to play and it was different, when you hear it back, you're like, oh, I kind of like that because it's different. It's really interesting. Engineers have taught me a lot, studio engineers. I always use them as my ears. I have such respect for what they do because they have to live with a project from the beginning. I just walk in and play a solo or play a part, whatever. But the rule with engineers in Miami is, when Calle comes in, just get the first take. He's going to want to do it 100 times. Just always keep the first take because that's going to be the one you end up using anyway, because that's the most natural one. But there are times when, the first take isn't good or you make a mistake. But there's just so much to learn, and there's so much. Because we're not perfect, we have so many variables that change, and what we like today, we might not like 3 months from now.
Yeah.
Might really be into one thing right now, and then all of a sudden, I don't know, listen to Sonny Stitt, and you're like, I really got to work on my bebop vocabulary. Or you listen to Bird, and you're like, I really got to learn how to play all those chords, like the sevenths and the ninths and the 11s and the 13s and all that kind of stuff. Or I listen to Elvin, and I listen to that energy and his ability to communicate with Coltrane. I'm like, I got to make enough space so that the drummer and I can have that kind of fraternity, that kind of relationship. Gosh, it never ends. Just never ends. And it's great. It's beautiful.
How do you, okay, this is a great conversation, and someone could say, all right, but then I get overwhelmed by all that, and then I give up. So how can you take that feeling of possible overwhelm into being that driven person? You know what I'm saying?
Yes. My friend, I have a friend of mine, Isabel Medina, who's in education, and she said she was a great administrator, and she is a great administrator. She said to me, if you want to eat a dinosaur, you have to eat a dinosaur one bite at a time. Now, I've never wanted to eat a dinosaur, but that's the thing, is that it's very easy to say, I stink, or I'm not very good, or I have a lot of work to do. But as learned people and as musicians, we figure out the little things that are bothering us, and we work on those little things one at a time. And if you buy the share book, the Brecker's Notes, he mentions that throughout the book in different places, where he says, practice this 5 minutes a day, or work on this, or I have to remember to bring my lip out, or I have to. And when we do it like that, then it becomes kind of fun. It becomes and more importantly, always practice things in an applied manner. In other words, if I'm working on third finger stuff, ring finger stuff, and I wanna practice that, well, then practice those against a chord where you're going to play ring finger patterns, so that you work something out, and so that you're always making music. Because one of the real challenges that we have is that until you get to a very advanced stage, playing by ourselves is difficult. We don't hear the big picture. We don't hear all the harmony. We don't hear all the nuance. We don't hear all those things for a long time. And so for younger musicians and people as they're improving, if we can apply this stuff to a musical setting, then it makes it fun. then all of a sudden we have a reason to do that. And when you can, the metronome, there are two things that will never lie to you: the metronome and the tape recorder. They never lie. They will always tell you you're late or you're early, you're in tune, you're out of tune, your sound is good, your sound is bad, you didn't breathe. They tell you everything. And so no one is a worse critic than ourselves. We hear it, and we hear it right away. And so we just take those things that are bothering us and we fix them. And if you spend a week working on any one thing, you're going to get better at it fast, especially once you get past the point of, where's C, where's G, where's all that kind of stuff. Right. That becomes very contagious. And now you have a method, a plan of attack of how you master or how you overcome those obstacles. And that part of it takes the overwhelming away from you. There's another thing that I've learned too that's very important, is the plateaus. I have learned that we all hit these plateaus, and the better player you are, the faster you get to the next plateau. You're improving, and all of a sudden you hit the wall.
Yep.
And then it's almost like you're sliding backwards, right?
Yep.
Those days where nothing comes out, and you're just, oh my goodness. Well, what I've learned is that I go and I transcribe something. I'm not talking about transcribing a solo now. I'm talking about transcribing a bass line from a great song, transcribing a chord progression from a great piece of music or a film score, checking out a voicing from a piano player or a string patch, checking out the way somebody played a melody and transcribing a 4-bar phrase and learning it in a few keys, trying to learn how to play a melody the way a singer would sing it. Let's face it, if I could play the saxophone the way that Barbra Streisand sings, I would be the king of the world. There is no better musician, as far as I'm concerned, on the planet than Barbra Streisand.
Wow, okay.
That woman it's uncanny, her ability to make music. Everything that she does when she sings is perfect. The way she gets notes, her vibrato, her delivery, her control, her articulation, her time, her pitch. It's ridiculous. Well, talk about a standard. All right, so I put on one of her songs, and I try to play it on the saxophone the way she sings it. Man, the plateau disappears. It's amazing. All of a sudden, because your brain is now in a different place. Yeah. Your whole focus is now on making music. It's not on that thing that was tripping you up. And so every time I do that, I hear a great bass line, whether it's Frank Cornelius or whether it's, Jimmy Haslip or whoever it is, or Jocko, and I check it out, or I listen to Benson and I listen to one of the way he uses the blues scale on a line, or the way he plays a bebop scale. And I'm like, I gotta use that. I gotta learn that, and singers are great examples for us because we play an instrument that's melodic. And so they're a great tool. I've transcribed a lot of James Ingram and Patty Austin and Barbra Streisand and a lot of great singers because I love what they do. And I want to be able to express that on a saxophone. And so I'm still learning that. I wish that I'd spent more time doing that. And I've been going through some of that again, doing that along with some technical things and some other things that I'm trying to play and trying to expand the vocabulary to find new things to play, because I don't know about you, but I get sick of hearing myself play. I play a solo and I'm like, okay, well, now play something new. And something that, again, not only Michael, but a lot of people have said this to me. But Michael said it. He asked me, he said, hey, from the time that you start working on something till the time that it shows up on the bandstand, how long does it take? I said, well, I don't want to tell you because it's embarrassing. So how long does it take you? And he said to me, 3 months. I said, that's funny. That's exactly what I was going to say, 3 months. So there's an incubation period from the time that we learn something and it becomes a rudiment to the time that it gets transformed into part of our language. Because the problem with licks, for example, we're never going to be in a position where we're like playing along and all of a sudden it's like, this is the perfect time for that lick. Boom. It just doesn't happen. We have to synthesize the information and have it accessible in that wonderful memory bank that we have in our brain so that we can play something that's inspired by it or that's influenced by it, or maybe that exact thing that happens, but that it isn't planned, it isn't pre-planned, it isn't mechanic. And that's what the 3 months are for. It's that mechanical practice, rudimentary stuff that happens. And so, those kinds of tips, I think, they've been very helpful to me over time. He also said something that Arturo also does. Says, I always start practicing things very slowly, not in a race. Because that's where you work out all those little things that when you start to speed him up, the dirt, you don't notice the dirt when it's real slow, but when you speed them up, the dirt starts to blip, 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 and that's where we get caught. And then we have to go backwards, and that's always a drag. Yeah. So it's better to start slowly and work our way into that thing. Isn't it a wonderful world that we live in, though, when you think about the music, and we're in a wonderful space. It's such a positive, kind of uplifting, challenging space. It's nice.
Yeah, and what was interesting, what you said before too about the metronome and the tape recorder won't lie to you. Absolutely. But the other thing too, and with our generations growing up, we didn't have everything that's out there now. Like, could you imagine if you pictured yourself, in your teens and stuff, and you were able to access YouTube or iReal Pro or, a Band in a Box or something like that? Could you imagine?
I can't imagine, because then the bar would have been raised so much higher by everybody that came before us. I always wonder what Bach would have done with MIDI. And it's but you're right. I kind of like the fact that I come from an old school and I had to learn it. I always tell people that when I first started learning, it was with a stone tablet and a chisel. But it's kind of cool that way. But you're right. The other one that never lies to you is the mirror. I always tell my students, I tell the guys, especially the macho ones, I said, it's good to have like a little makeup mirror in your case, because that's something that you can put up and you can check out your posture, you can check out your hands, you can check out your embouchure. Those things never lie. YouTube doesn't lie. It can be flattering sometimes. You play something nice and you're like, oh, that was good, and then the next phrase is not so good, and so it can be very unflattering. But YouTube is a great lesson. It's a great class. It's a great study. My goodness, to be able to go back and listen to Coleman Hawkins and Ben Webster and watch them play, Jerry Mulligan. I wish that I had that when I was younger. I think I would have been inspired to learn more traditional jazz that way, as I'm such a tweener. I'm such a person who kind of does everything. And I like it that way. I don't get bored that way.
Yeah.
But there's just so much to learn, and there are so many brilliant people on the earth, and so many of them that are on their way up. Like so many of the young people today that are going to be great masters of the music in the future. I had a chance to go to school. I mean, my classmates were Andy Snitzer and Rick Margitza and Joel McNeely, who wrote all the music for 50 Ways to Die in the West, and Andy Sturman, who plays with Philip Glass. And those guys, I mean, we had like this open door policy where one guy was practicing and a girl was practicing over there, and we would walk in their room and like, hey, what was that? And we'd teach each other, and we'd support each other, and we'd help each other. There was never a feeling of competition, of like, oh, I don't want to show them that, because then they're gonna, like, man, the better one person does, the better everybody does. The better Kenny G does, the better all the saxophone players do. The better Chuck Mangione does, the better all the musicians do. I'm so tired of people just bashing everybody because I don't know what the hell is wrong with them. Like, just live and let live, man. Just support those people. Give them a hug when you see them. I'm a huge fan of Kenny G. He's a great musician. I heard all those Lorber records. I've heard him play. He can really play. And people say things, and I just shake my head like, man, just jealousy is one thing, but give me a break. Guy's great. Just stop. And people who do all kinds of different things. They play a different style, but they're all great players. Junior Walker and King Curtis. King Curtis was a freak. He was a freak saxophone player. Just a brilliant saxophone player. And all we can do is try to learn from him. Tom Scott. Is there a better saxophone player, musician, all-around musician on the planet? I don't think so. The guy's a freaking genius. And Stanley Turrentine and the rest of them. And I get to run into people all the time who are at the top of the A list, and they're working on stuff. They don't stop. Dan Higgins, what a brilliant saxophone player, what a brilliant musician, man, what a great human being, what a great person, what a heavyweight, and what a nice man. I just play with him. Doesn't know me from Adam. We're like buddies. Bob Shepard and the rest of them. I mean, they're all Jerry Hay. They're all the same. You work with these people and you realize that they're all, one is better than the next, or one is as good as the next, or better, or whatever. There's no axe to grind. They're just working on their craft, man. If they can help you and they can challenge you and they can crack a joke and make you feel better, and so I hope that these kinds of conversations will help people find that in themselves and find that in others, and for them to know the quality of human beings that we have on this planet. When people say David Liebman, they know him as a musician. I know him as a human being. Michael Brecker and Randy Brecker and Peter Erskine. I asked him the other day about doing a master class for me, and he wrote right away, and he was completely into doing it. And one of the greatest drummers who's ever lived, and one of the greatest musicians I've ever worked with, and a heck of a nice guy, just a super guy. And people like that who are willing to help young people, what you're doing on your podcast. And I also hope that you find some people who are not quite as helpful, so we can always get the other side, But it really is about empowering each other, about helping each other. What Jody does every day with his mouthpieces, he's making us all better.
And that's the point. That's the whole point of everything,
Isn't it?
Yeah, no, for sure. Now, before we go, just a couple more questions. I want to thank you for your time, by the way. I appreciate it.
Sure.
You've got, first of all, you won a Grammy in 2015, which was awesome.
Right, yes.
Yeah,
that was fun.
That was awesome. And so now, upcoming projects or projects that you have right now that are going on.
Great question. I have not recorded as often as I should because of school. I've really been able to help a lot of students, not all of them, but a lot of them, and that's been my primary job and my family. But there's a new album out. There's a smooth jazz album out that was done by a great friend of mine, Hal Batt, and Mike Lewis, a great arranger, composer, and they made a record for me. It's called Soulful Nights, and that's out and has done nicely on the charts and all that kind of stuff. It's more of a smooth jazz thing, and I love that music. I've recorded a couple of more Latin jazz records with some other people now, and I'm going to go in and record a live video album the end of July with some new music. So I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way, where we're all playing live in one room and with an audience, sort of like Snarky Puppy kind of thing. I'm a big fan of theirs.
Oh, cool.
And we're going to record live, and we're going to do some new music, some original music, and I have a couple of singers who are going to come in and sit in. Primarily a pastor from my church who's an incredible singer, and the only people that know him are in the Christian world, and this guy's one of the greatest singers I've ever worked with, so I want people to hear him singing a bolero and all that kind of stuff. He's great. You get to a certain age where you really want to, as much as you can, help people get heard and get noticed and get the kind of recognition that they deserve. I've been very fortunate in my life to get a lot of it. And I want, there are a lot of people deserving it, and I want to help them find those things. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And then we're going to go in and do a studio album of different stuff. And I'm working on a new big band record like Mom Blue, because that's a whole different thing. But I just went out to Costa Rica and did a record with the CCCN Jazz Band. They won the Monterey Jazz Festival. They were #1 band, and I was a guest artist with them, and that record just came out. And playing on a lot of pop records and a lot of other people's records all the time. I'm very fortunate with that. I have a nice setup at home. I record from home all the time.
Okay.
I'll go in next week to record some stuff at the studio. Did some stuff with Deborah Silver, who has a very good album. It's kind of like a classic Americana music, some almost country swing kind of thing. She's a great singer. She's had a lot of success on the radio.
Interesting.
I work a lot with Charlie Calello. Charlie Calello was very close with Michael Brecker. Charlie Calello was the man who wrote the arrangement of Native New Yorker that Michael played the tenor solo on. And so I get to hang out with Charlie and learn about arranging and about orchestration and writing, and this guy's done so much. So there are a lot of new projects coming out. I play a lot with the symphony here, and I'm writing a piece for orchestra and saxophone. I'd like to at some point record a classical album, but I'm going to do it in a very different way. I'm not going to do it with a classical sound. I'm going to play it the way I play.
That's
because
cool.
If Debussy or any of those people were alive today and they heard me play, and I've had the case where great composers have heard me play, and they always come up to me and say, I need to write something for you. They're not asking me to play it in a different way. They're asking me to play like me. And so I think for too long, the classical world has been in a box, and I don't like the box. I love people who play that and play it well, and there are some people who do it ridiculously well. But I'm not going to play like that. Don't want to. And so I'm going to do something different. And still, I think that music can be played lots of different ways without having to have a very particular kind of sound or vibrato or
Okay.
kind of thing. I just think it's time to change the marker a little bit. The hip hop guys have done it very well. You know, they at first nobody wanted to talk to them, and they said, well, if you're not going to let us make music, we'll just do it on our own. And now everybody's trying to copy them. So there's a lot to learn from those people, those guys and girls. And, you know, everything changes, everything evolves. And the more that we can be a part of the process, even if we have to take some lumps for it, it's okay. You know, it'll be okay. So I'm working on a lot of projects, and my real goal is to spend about the next 10 years becoming the saxophone player that I should be, not the one that I am. And then at that point I'll reassess and see what life brings. If God still has me here and he wants me to keep doing it, I'll keep doing it. And if not, I will go on to other things. I am working on an app that is going to change the way we learn. It's very different than anything that's out. And that should be out end of August. And I really want to help people learn. And I've learned how to learn over time, and I want to help people do that. If I can make their life's journey a little easier, I want to be able to do that. A lot of people have done it for me.
When you say learn, do you mean just general subjects, or do you mean saxophone?
Saxophone and music, a lot of general stuff, a lot of because there's just much more. We play the saxophone, but the saxophone is a musical instrument. It's an instrument that makes music. And the technical part of the saxophone is something that we could teach machines. You know, there's those videos on YouTube where you see a machine playing giant steps with the fingers moving and all that. But there's no music there. There's just eventually they might get there, but not right now. The music is really important. And the thing about, you know, why am I learning this? And where can I use it? And how is this going to make me better when I go play tonight at the church or at the bar mitzvah or at the wedding or with my band or in a bar? If we can do that, then we've changed the game. We've really changed the game. Not that, well, you know, practice this for 3 months and then you'll be able to play Cherokee. No, I want you to be able to learn something that when you go tonight, everything that you play is going to be better because you know how to do this thing. And so that's where I'm focusing on. That's where my application is. And that comes from a lot of learning about learning, a lot of doctorate about education and a lot of studying with all that kind of stuff. But I know that God puts us here for a reason. I know that in my case, to show you. When I went to record in New York with Arturo for the Flight to Freedom album, the rhythm section is Dave Weckl and Chick Corea and Anthony Jackson and other people were playing. The reason I got to do that recording was that they asked me, Arturo was going to do the demos in Miami, and they asked me to come and sight read all the stuff. And so I did. And I played all the solos on the stuff. And the A&R guy called me in and said, we've just been talking and we'd like you to come to New York and do this record. And so I said, I'd love to do it, but I'm in the middle of math finals. I was studying mathematics. And so I'll talk to my professors. I'll get back to you tomorrow. So I went to the university and I said to them, I have an opportunity to go to New York and record. None of them knew who I was because I used Eduardo Calle, not Ed Calle. So when I said who I was, they said, "You're the saxophone player?" I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Why didn't you tell me?" I said, "Well, because if I did that, you wouldn't take me seriously as a math student. I was in, advanced calculus and number theory and all these crazy things." So they all let me take the finals early, and I went to New York to do the recording. And we're doing the record, and this is a true story. We're playing, and the solo is playing on the track and all that kind of stuff. And Chick walks up to me and says, "I want to talk to you for a minute. Come take a walk with me." So we go out of the control room and we go into the tracking room. And Chick Corea puts his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Walk with me." And Chick, this is God. This is Chick was sent. This is a messenger. He says, "So they tell me you're studying math and that you're thinking about not doing music anymore." I said, "Yeah, I've been a little dejected with this stuff." He said, "Well, there are very few people on this earth that play as well as you do. So do us all a favor and play the saxophone." And he squeezed my shoulder and he walked away.
Wow.
So that was Chick being a messenger for me. And I realized that the more I do this, that what I do in music is not about me. It's God made me do this for a reason. And the reason is that I'm supposed to help other people do it. I have a lot of fun doing it, and I like making music. But at this point in my life, I realize I've been doing it at the college for a long time, but with a lot of non-musicians. Now I get to do it with musicians. And so I have a big faith in God, and that I think overrides a lot of things. And it certainly has taught me that my purpose here has been preordained.
For sure. And I oh my gosh, there's so many great stories. But listen, let me ask you one more question. Your socials. I don't know how involved you are on your socials or whatever, but where can people find you?
They can find me on Instagram at Dr. Ed Calle, so it's DREDCALLE. It's the same on Twitter. I try not to use that too much because that thing is not a very positive place. Instagram is different.
Yeah.
That thing is not, and as a musician, I've worked with people from every walk of life, every color, every creed, every race, every political opinion, never had a problem until you get onto Twitter and then, you can't be a conservative and it's like, you can be whatever you want. If you're a good person, you're a good person. You don't have to be any, whatever. But Instagram is there. There is a YouTube channel. It's not very active. I don't spend a lot of time there. Facebook, I think it's Ed Calle Official because somebody stole my Facebook account years ago.
Oh, Jesus.
So it's Ed Calle Official. I don't go on there that often, but what I like about that is that I get a chance to catch up with a lot of friends, a lot of people that I went to high school with, middle school with, a lot of nice people who just have nice things to say to you. They put up videos and they do things. I also have a chance to support my friends who are promoting something, and they put up a video and I try to share it or put it on my feed so that people will see them. There are people like I have a friend, Paul Messina, who's a really good saxophone player, and he makes albums and stuff like that. And I always, whenever he puts stuff out, I try to help that. I try to support all those people. I don't think it's a competition. It never has been, never gonna be. Everybody has something to offer. Everybody has something to say. It's all good. It's all important. Everybody has a market. For the musicians, for the saxophone players, I always tell people this. Somebody asked me the other day, said, "Well, how do we compete with Shakira?" I'm like, we don't compete with Shakira. We can't. She's a brand that every person on this earth knows who she is, and she's great, and she's beautiful, and she's sweet, and she's talented, and I've recorded for her, and I love her to death. Can't compete with her. It's not a competition. But every corner has every neighborhood has a restaurant. That restaurant isn't famous. It isn't on the magazines in New York. It isn't, but they've been there for 30, 40, 50 years. The children run the restaurant now. The grandparents ran it. We go there. Our friends are there. We love that place, and they make a living. And those people have a home, and they have a family, and they're great members of our community and society. We are like that. We're all like the restaurant on the corner, the neighborhood restaurant. We all have a market. We all have a marketplace. We can work at it really hard to expand it if we want. If you're into that, great, do it. I've never been about that. I've never been about fame or fortune. I've been about trying to learn how to play the saxophone and how to make music, and my family and the rest of it, and my friends. And unfortunately, when you get to this age, start to lose a lot of friends. So the social stuff is great. It's a great way to be able to communicate with people and sort of get to know people. I've made friends from people from Africa, from the Middle East, from all over the world, from Russia, from places that, friends from Ukraine, from Russia, from Poland, from everywhere. That's a great thing. But the static that's in our society today, it's a never-ending campaign. It's a never-ending, everybody's the devil. It's just, there's a lot more to life than that. Music, we never see that. Music, we just go there, we love each other, we play with each other, we support each other. Even the people that have big egos and come in and try to impress us, within 5 minutes they're part of the family and they've forgotten all that stuff. And God, I wish we could just share this way of life with the world. Have a lot less problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? That's a great note to end on, no pun intended. But oh my gosh, Ed, this was like, seriously, this was like a masterclass, not just in one topic, but in so many topics. And you are such an inspiring person. I am so grateful that I had the chance to talk with you, but also so grateful to Melvin for introducing us. I can't even begin to tell you. Thank you so much.
I'm thankful for you. God bless you for all you're doing. Thanks to Melvin and Jody and everybody else who's making our lives better through their inventions and their creations and their efforts. I am your biggest fan, and I'll be watching. I'll be keeping an eye on you, and I hope we can see each other in person and make some music and have some lunch together and talk shop and get to know about each other as human beings, and on top of all the music stuff. But thank you so much for all you're doing. And a big hug to all the saxophone players out there, famous and soon to be famous. I love you all, and I'm thankful for you all.